The Justice Minister announced he is splitting his proposed online harms bill. Arif Virani making the decision today, saying the more controversial portions of the bill, those that deal with online hate speech and the complaints process, will be dealt with down the road in order that legislation around protecting children from online sexual abuse can be passed quickly and before any dissolution of the House. We are now joined by the Federal Justice Minister, Arif Virani. Minister Virani, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Listen, let's begin with the timing here, because it took your government years to introduce a bill to address online abuse. And only after months of delay in the House, you announced that you will be splitting the bill in order to get it moving quickly. Why did it take so long to get to this point?
Well, I'd say to you that we consulted extensively on the bill because we wanted to get it right. We looked at domestic expertise, we looked at international comparators. That took time, years in fact, and we tabled a very comprehensive bill in February. In the spring, we started debate on this bill, and I thought that was a promising start. After Labor Day, we returned to the House of Commons. We also recommenced debate on this bill. I was encouraged by that as well. What I've unfortunately seen for the last 3 months is a complete blockage of the chamber that is right behind me, and that's been frustrating. It's been frustrating to me as a parliamentarian. It's been frustrating to me as Minister of Justice, who's put a lot of effort and thought into this very piece of legislation. Now we're approaching Christmas. I had a tough decision to make. Do I want to see this bill die on the order paper, or do I want to see parts of this bill expedited where I believe that we can reach some consensus? I chose the latter. I think it's an important decision because ultimately my job is to protect Canadians, and I'm going to target the most vulnerable Canadians, which are our kids. And I approach that from that vein, that protecting and combating hate against hate is important, but protecting kids, including kids who might face fatal dangers, is urgent, and I'm proceeding with urgency on the parts of this bill where I believe I can achieve a consensus.
Okay, so you think you can achieve the consensus, and when you look at this, the Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, it again will now consist of two parts. One part will deal with keeping children safe online, which includes sexploitation, pornography. The second part relates to the Criminal Code and Human Rights Act, which includes the controversial section on free speech. Given that you have split the bill and the priority is the section on child safety, do you think you will be able to pass the second part of this, which you have said would give Canadians a recourse on discriminatory hate speech?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful, Michael, and I want Canadians to understand that when you bifurcate the bill, we are not leaving one part aside. We will still be pursuing both pieces of legislation. We'll be pursuing the portions that deal with addressing children with prioritization, working very, very quickly on those. But the portions that relate to amending the Criminal Code and amending the Canadian Human Rights Act remain on the floor of the legislature for debate and further study. I think what is also clear to all Canadians is that we have seen rising hatred in this country. There are a lot of ideas about what we should do in terms of how to address that hatred. We've heard people that support the bill. We've heard people that want the bill refined to provide more clarity. I'm all ears and willing to entertain good faith suggestions to improving the hatred components of this bill, but also to improving the portions that deal with combating child sex predation, and also things like bullying, inducing a child to self-harm, and the sharing of what's called revenge porn. These are critical things that help keep our kids safe. I think what's now clear is that the ball is in the court of my opposition parliamentarian colleagues. I've already had good indications from the Bloc Québécois, the NDP. The Conservative Party has unfortunately been blocking everything in the chamber right behind me for 3 months now, but I've been given some reason for optimism that even the Conservatives will get behind this bill because they appreciate the urgency and appreciate the need to proceed in a nonpartisan manner.
Okay, so perhaps a political path forward. But, you know, I also wonder about what your government is doing to ensure big tech, social media platforms are putting in place the guardrails they promise to prevent or reduce online abuse.
Well, I'll say to you, Michael, that it's been frustrating because what we've seen is a checkerboard response, right? We've seen some companies taking pretty aggressive steps, others taking very few steps. What we're trying to do is eliminate that checkerboard, provide Canadians with the stability and understanding that regardless of which platform your child is on, which app that they are using, for example, that this will address the safety of children online across the board and set a new floor. What I've been encouraged by, Michael, is actually has been the response of social media companies thus far, as opposed to to rolling up the sleeves, gloves off, getting ready for battle. It has been quite the opposite. Social media companies have been reaching out to me in my office, considering ways of how they can collaborate with us in order to get this across the finish line. I think it's helped by the fact that we are the 6th or the 7th democracy in the Western world that is moving in this area. They've already seen what other international allies have done in this area. They've realized that more needs to be done to protect children around the world and in Canada, and they're willing to work with us in that regard.
Okay. Now, you know, I do wonder, in the time we have left, I wonder what, in your opinion, will happen if Bill C-63 does not pass before the House is dissolved and another election takes place?
Well, if you take your cues from what the official opposition has presented as their proposed alternative, there is some consideration about criminal code reform, but that's it. And I think that's problematic, because what I've heard from law enforcement and what I've heard from parents, including people like Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda Todd, is that the victimization of her daughter still occurs 10 years after her death. The reason why is because images of Amanda's naked body continue to circulate online 10 years after she passed by suicide. What she wants, and what the police have told me that they want to deliver, is for those images to simply come down. That is possible with this piece of legislation because it imposes duties on social media platforms and requires them to take down child sex abuse material and revenge porn within a 24-hour time period. So I'm very confident that that's the right solution. It needs to pass, and that's why I'm putting a lot of effort and political capital on the line to ensure that by bifurcating, we can proceed with speed on the parts where we can achieve a consensus. I have confidence in the better principled nature of my colleagues in the chamber from other parties and their willingness to work in a nonpartisan way to keep kids safe. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, lives are at stake here, and that's important.
Mr. Arif Virani, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much for having me.